Okay, let's get underway. Hopefully a few more people will join us shortly. If not, as you'll notice in the top left-hand corner, there's a recording button. The session tonight will be recorded and will be made available afterwards off the Hillsville Core website. So at the moment, there aren't any of the others available, but we are working with our volunteers to try and get them up just as soon as we can. I'd like to welcome you all tonight to this webinar with Lucinda Flynn. I'll introduce Lucinda shortly. This session is on home energy efficiency, and it's the third one in the series of the 4 that we're running. And next week, we will also have Gerald Ahrens joining us from Como Energy. So that will end the series at that point, apart from our field day, which will be a couple of weeks after that. And we'll talk more about that in one of the other sessions. Before going any further, I would like to just acknowledge that the Wurundjeri people are the traditional custodians of this land. And I'd also like to pay respect to the elders, both past and present, of the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians present. As I mentioned in each of the other programs, and I won't repeat the stuff that I said there, apart from to say that this program eventuated as a consequence of the work of the Yarra Valley Community Power Hub and Hillsville Core and the other 5 community energy groups that were involved with the hub. And we're very grateful for the funding from the Victorian Government and Sustainability Victoria to enable this event to happen. These events don't happen without people being recompensed for their work. A lot of preparation goes into the planning and the organising, and the teachers sort of working out what it is that they're going to present. And it's been great to have the funding to be able to support the teachers to do that work. It's been wonderful, in addition, having the support from Emerald Community House and Pakenham Living and Learning, who the 2 organisations that are hosting this, and also obtained some funding from the Education Department, for which we're also very grateful. This is the last of the events of the hub, so it's our last hurrah, if you like, and it's a great pleasure for me to be your introductory host for this evening. I'll come back at the end of the show. But what I would like to do is introduce Lucinda. I first got to know Lucinda way back at the beginning of the work of the hub, I think in about July or August last year. And Lucinda was introduced to me by someone who had been involved with clean energy in Nillumbik, and said that she was a great person who knew a lot about home energy efficiency and was a great presenter and very engaging with audiences. So I made arrangements to meet Lucinda, and all of what was said about you turned out to be true. So it's with great pleasure tonight that I have Lucinda on this program, and we have her here tonight. Lucinda and I spent quite a lot of time working together to develop the training program for the volunteers from the various community energy groups that put their hands up to train at the Box Hill Institute. That course had never existed, and Lucinda and I, in consultation with Mary and Miriam from Emerald and Pakenham, worked quite hard to get the course off the ground. And Lucinda put in a lot of the hard yards because it was her program, and all of the students that did the course really enjoyed it, and we got very positive feedback from people. So we were really delighted about that. And I now have pressure from Hillsville Core asking when we're going to run the next program. And I keep saying, well, when we get some more funding for another Yarra Valley Community Power Hub, that we might be able to do it a little bit earlier, getting grant funding from other sources. But that's for a later time. For tonight, I'd like to introduce you to Lucinda, who's going to present all things good and wonderful about home energy efficiency and how you can have a more energy efficient home. And Lucinda, I'd like to hand the session over to you now. I'll switch off my microphone and my video, and I'll be available in the background if you need me for any chat purposes. And I'll also come back towards the end of the session, and I'll leave the rest times for you and the group to decide.
Sounds good.
Bye for now.
And I just have to say, it's wonderful to see a couple of the faces who have done the training here, Lyndall and Tim, and I don't think there's anyone else. But it's really exciting that you're here. I work as a home energy efficiency assessor, and what that means is that I go to people's houses and help them work out how their houses are using energy and ways that they can make them more energy efficient, but also more comfortable. So that's what this presentation is about. That's my real big passion. I'm just going to share a screen with you, so bear with me for a moment. And can someone tell me if they can see that okay? Yep. Great. Thanks, Tim. So home energy efficiency, I've just said what it is that I do. This tool that I usually use is called the Scorecard. And it is a new tool developed originally by the Victorian government that allows people to get a snapshot of what sort of cost their home is likely to be to run per year. I'm finding it really useful, and at the end of this presentation, I'll talk a bit more about that, and also how you might be able to move into being a Scorecard energy efficiency assessor, because it is a wonderful job. I'm just trying to change screens. What is an energy efficient house? It is one that's pretty comfortable. So at this time of year, you probably won't be coming home and putting on a heater, because it's hopefully going to be keeping you fairly comfortable as is. If you do need to put one on, it doesn't cost you too much, and it maintains its temperature as well. So it's not getting an energy efficiency assessment isn't about me saying, oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, you've got to do this. It's about working out how to make your home work for you as well as it possibly can. And there's lots of reasons why you might want to do that. The three biggest ones are cost savings, which is very significant. The average home in Victoria costs around $1,800 a year just to run the main fixed appliances. So that's heating, cooling, lighting, hot water, and pools if they have one. And so that's just a 3-star rating. If you go below that, it's higher. I think a 1-star rated house is more than $5,000 a year annually. So as you get a higher rating, your costs go down dramatically. And that's, of course, a massive motivation for a lot of people. Of course, comfort is a huge one. And sometimes people have no issues at all with their bills, but their houses just aren't very comfortable. So that's a really important one. And you can... I had an example of a house that I went to and did a scorecard on, and they then did a whole lot of upgrades and got me to come back to do another one to see what the difference was. And he said, we used to have just plug-in electric heaters, and it would cost us $300 a month to run them, and we were still always freezing. And now we've got 2 efficient reverse cycle air conditioners, and it's $120 a month, and we're always warm. So he'd done a combination of appliance upgrades, but also building shell upgrades. Victorian homes are quite famous, actually, for being inefficient the way they're built. Not just Victorian, probably Australian homes. And sometimes I'll do assessments for people from Europe, and they're a bit stunned by you know, suddenly living in these houses that leak like a sieve, and you know, that you have no other option except to turn the heater on if you get cold. There are a few reasons for it. One, I think, is just that we are in a fairly mild climate comparatively, and so we've been able to get away with having pretty poor building codes. They don't seem to be, even the building codes we have don't seem to be very well policed, so that you might have a plan that says you're going to do certain things, but nobody really comes to check that you have. There have also been traditionally very cheap fuel sources in Australia, which people have made use of and just fallen back on using devices to change their temperature rather than their home, rather than improve the efficiency of their home. And so all of that has just resulted in a society where people have a very low understanding of energy efficiency and how it works. It's not so much that they don't want to do anything about it, they just have no idea of how to. There are three main factors. The first is the building shell thermal efficiency, and that is about the barrier that is between you and the outside air. So it's the construction of the house, the insulation, drafts, windows, all of those aspects. And if you have a really good thermally efficient building shell, then any kind of appliance you use to heat or cool is going to do it better and cheaper, because it's not working so hard to you know, have to produce all this heat that's then lost out of the building shell. Appliance efficiency is also important, and we'll talk through the most efficient options for the main appliances in a home, but also some things you can do to make your appliances more efficient without necessarily changing them over. And user behaviour it relates back to both of those first two factors, because even if you have a really efficient building shell and really good appliances, if you use them poorly, you can still be using a lot more energy than you need to. So it's a bit of all three, and we'll refer to them all along the way. Houses in Victoria typically use, well, this chart is from Sustainability Victoria. When I do scorecards, it also indicates how much of the total bill is likely to be certain things. And from my experience, heating is even more than that often. It's often over 50%, and sometimes it's up to, you know, 60, 70% of the total fixed household energy bill. So it's a big one that we all need to focus on. And when we do an energy efficiency assessment, a lot of what we're doing is trying to reduce those costs for heating because they're so significant. So we'll start with building shell thermal efficiency. And this is, as I said, the shell that separates you from the outside environment. The areas that we look at are zoning, drafts, ceiling insulation, window improvements, wall insulation, and underfloor insulation. And generally, I will look at them in that order. And if they're all poor, then I would upgrade them in that order because they're going to give you the most benefit for what you do. But every house, of course, is completely unique, and some will have amazing ceiling insulation and everything else might be poor. So then ceiling insulation gets shunted down to the bottom of the to-do list. That's, I suppose, where an energy efficiency assessor can come in, because they can have that real holistic overview of how all those bits play with each other and fit in together. So we'll talk through these one by one. Zoning is the first one, and it can actually be an incredibly simple and incredibly effective way to both reduce your energy use and improve your comfort. Zoning as a concept is just about creating smaller areas in your home that you can heat and cool as you need, and also potentially zoning out problematic areas that, say, if you've got a room that is right at the west corner, northwest corner, and it's always hot in summer, you could potentially just zone it out to reduce all of that heat coming into the rest of the house. And another common place to zone out would be a drafty bathroom or laundry. Heating and cooling by zone is always cheaper, And so any system that you have, if it can be zoned or if you add individual systems per zone, that's always going to be a lot more efficient. And because the system is only heating a smaller area, it's more efficient at it as well. Adding additional zoning can be challenging depending on the design of the house, and especially the really new open plan houses can be extremely hard. They're not set up for it at all. But older houses are already fairly well zoned. Sometimes people who live in older houses will have taken out lots of doors. So sometimes it's just about maybe putting a curtain back across a doorway or a hallway to reduce the amount of air that's crossing through and having to be heated and cooled. The photo on the left, the one that says curtain across hallway, that one is actually from a house I went to visit, and in front of it was a massive living, kitchen, dining area, and behind it was an equally big space, which was hall and a big sort of landing with stairs going down to an underfloor area that was huge and open. And so by adding that simple curtain across the hallway, they pretty much halved the amount of space that their heater was trying to heat. And they said they couldn't believe how much difference it made to their comfort and also how hard the heater was working. The Japanese curtain is fine. Sometimes people say, does it have to be something really, sealed and heavy? But it doesn't. Even very lightweight curtains can do the trick. The third image along, that's sort of I've never seen this. This is a honeycomb blind that's installed so that it opens from left to right instead of up to down, which is what's normal over a window. This picture is over a window, but I imagine that could work potentially in some hallways to replace a door that might have been there, and it be lightweight and also fold right back and be very unobtrusive. But I haven't seen it before, I have to say. So it's an idea of mine that I'm yet to see come real. And then all of the photos to the right are very creative ways that people have found to seal off an upstairs from a downstairs. When I go to a 2-story home, it's really, really common that the living spaces are at the bottom and the bedrooms are at the top, and the bedrooms are always, if they're heating at the bottom, it flows up the stairs, and the bedrooms are too hot and they're not even there in the day and they're having trouble staying warm downstairs. So if there's a way that you can seal off the downstairs from the top, that's brilliant. Sometimes it's not too hard, but yeah, it's not always an option, but if it is, it's well worth doing. Draft proofing is a massive area, and sometimes I think if people just looked at zoning and draft proofing in their homes, I'm convinced that they would often feel the difference straight off. I know in our house we certainly would have. We're in a 70s house which had heaps and heaps of drafts, and just draft sealing is enough to change our comfort levels. So this picture shows all of the kinds of drafts that are commonly found in a house, and we'll be talking through them, not all of them, but the most important ones. This next chart, which I hope you can see clearly enough, is it's a newer one that I found also from Sustainability Victoria, that shows the comparative impact of different kinds of drafts on a home. And you can see that the very, very biggest impact is an open chimney. If you have an open chimney, it's not that you don't that it's wrong or that you shouldn't have one, but it is really important to block it up if it's not in use. Most of the time when people have open fireplaces, I'm not talking about wood combustion heaters like the sealed ones. I'm talking about an open fireplace. Often when people have them, they'll say, oh yeah, we use it once or twice a year just for a bit of ambience. And the rest of the time, it's just this open hole sucking air out, conditioned air out of the house. So those are the ones that are really important to seal, which you can do. Actually, I'll talk about that in the next slide. The large gap or hole that's the next biggest impact would be from something like an open louver window in a bathroom, one of the ones that the louver windows that don't close at all, they're just permanently open. And then evaporative cooler covers are the next biggest one, which is very surprising for a lot of people because they're extremely common. I'd say probably half the houses that I go to have evaporative cooling, and people generally aren't aware what a drafty system they are. I won't go through the rest, but we will talk about some of them now. We'll begin with the open chimneys. So to seal them, there are, specifically made products that can be put into them. And the top right-hand side 2 pictures are of what's called a chimney sheet, which is a big piece of, a piece of felt that's cut to size to fit a chimney and has a pole on it, and you put it up your chimney and it's got a little tag hanging down saying this chimney has been blocked. That's an important factor because you don't want somebody coming to, stay for a few days and try and light a fire and, smoke out the house. The bottom right-hand side shows an image of another chimney seal product from a company called EcoMaster. They're a Melbourne-based company, and they have a range of really, really good draft proofing products of all types. And I highly recommend for all of this draft proofing stuff that you have a look at their website. One of the things that makes them so good is that they have little DIY videos for every single product that shows you step by step how to go about putting them in. So even if you're just researching and you're thinking you might make something yourself instead of buying it, that's fine. But you can get some really good information there about how they work and how to install things. Another thing that people do with open chimneys, professional draft proofers that I know will just cut a piece of high density polyester insulation and stuff that up there as well. So I've even heard people saying they've stuck cushions up there. So as long as you make a sign that tells you that it's been sealed, that's it. I can see a chat. I'm just going to try and work out how to. Cost. So the first question is, what is the name of the company? It's EcoMaster, EcoMaster. And the cost estimate for a sheet, the sheet is actually a UK product, and I don't know what it would cost, but under $100. And the chimney seal down below is an EcoMaster product. I would think it would be less than that, so less than 50, I think. But I'm afraid I don't know the exact cost. Okay, moving on from chimneys. Things that you can seal with weather strips. Actually, there are so many things that you can seal potentially with a weather strip that this is a good one for you to go to the EcoMaster website and do a bit of research on. The typical things that you would seal with weather strips are external doors, windows, and sometimes internal doors. Most people have experienced the draft proofing strips from a hardware store, the rubber or foam. They're okay, and sometimes they work, but because of the propensity of wooden framed doors and windows to sort of warp and have different widths of gap, sometimes those seals aren't the best option because they either don't fill some of the gap big enough or they're too big for other bits of the gap. And so you end up having trouble closing a door or window. They do compress a bit over time. So there's no problem with giving it a try. But if you find that it isn't working, EcoMaster has a really great product called EMV Seal, which is, have I got a photo of it? I don't think I do. It's basically a V-shaped piece of either plastic or laminated paper. I'm not sure what it is, but it also has a self-seal strip on one side. And when the door closes, it just can close to whatever gap width it needs to be. So it can handle a few different widths. It also comes in a roll. So that's a great one. Another thing they have is called a draft dodger, which is a more permanent draft sealing option for door perimeters and windows. You can have a look at the EcoMaster website. Internal doors, generally we would only draft seal internal doors when it's to a really drafty area, like for example a bathroom where there might be a a heat lamp, one of the Tastic heat lamps. They're very drafty and they can't be sealed in any way because of the heat that they're generating. And so sealing off that door might be the best option. Occasionally, seals are not quite enough for a door or window, and you actually need an adjustment of the door or window. There are professional companies that do draft sealing, and they can do a blitz on your house and do 100 different things, and they can do things like adjustments or perhaps filling things with cork. Next on the list, oops, I've gone too far, is sealing, things that you can seal with a caulking gun. This is a really satisfying job to do, is to walk around an older house and find all the little gaps and cracks and fill them up. Things like wall vents, we don't require them. They are predate the sort of 90s. I think it was 1990s that they stopped being installed in houses. And they are from when we used to have kerosene heaters and unflued gas heaters. These days we don't have those generally, and we can seal them. The only time I wouldn't is if you did have an indoor gas space heater. Other drafts that you can see here, there is, the bottom of a door frame, skirting gaps, architrave gaps, and also gaps that tradies have left when they've installed either plumbing or electrical items. Sometimes, if they're not very diligent, they'll leave them behind, in a new reverse cycle air conditioner. There'll be a bit of a hole there, or an oven or a dishwasher. So those things can all be checked as well and potentially filled up. If it's a bigger gap than usual, you might need a bit of filler rod to stick in there first, which is a little piece of foam that fills in the gap so that when you put the caulking gun along, it actually has something to stick onto and doesn't fall out. Unsealed exhaust fans, the picture in the middle is the heat lamp that I mentioned, and they're not possible to seal, unfortunately. But any of the others, such as the picture on the bottom right, that's just a typical exhaust fan in a bathroom, laundry, or toilet. They are just a hole in the ceiling plaster, and it's straight air movement between that room and the ceiling space. You can't see that it is because it's got the mesh thing at the bottom of it, but if that falls off, you'll be able to see the roof basically, and often you can see light. Luckily, there's a really simple fix, which is to put a draft stopper over the top, and that's what you see in the top right corner. They're also available free under the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme. So they're the same. That's the same scheme that offers light bulb exchanges and home energy monitors. So do look that up and try and get your hands on some. Evaporative, open skylights. Those are often very drafty, as are the open louver windows and the other permanently vented windows. It depends. What you do with it depends on whether you have an exhaust fan in there or whether the window is openable. You can see with that window with a mesh bit in it, that window is obviously openable, so you don't need that hole there at all. You can seal it up. With the open louver window, I would also cover that up at a pinch. You could do it with bubble wrap, or you could get it replaced properly with an openable window. And a skylight can be covered at ceiling level with that stuff that's shown in the bottom right-hand corner. It's called Sun Tough, and it's just a sort of cellular plastic that you can cut to size and add into that gap. There are other longer-term things you can do as well, but we're just looking at sealing up drafts, quickly and easily. Evaporative cooler vents. Here are some nice creative ways to seal up your own evaporative cooler vents, or the picture in the middle is a purpose-made vent cover. The idea with them is that as soon as you've used it for the last time in summer, you seal them up and leave them sealed all winter so that your nice warm air isn't escaping through the ductwork. The reason they're so drafty is that, unlike ducted heating systems or reverse cycle air conditioners, those sort of ducted systems are sealed systems, they're enclosed, whereas evaporative cooler systems are completely open on the roof. So there's nothing to stop air going through that unit on the roof and through your ductwork, or vice versa. Some other drafts that are less obvious are those caused by recessed downlights. That can be avoided by putting in a sealed downlight. And if you make sure it is IC4 rated, which is what you see at the top left-hand side, then that can also be safely covered with insulation. The Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme of replacing halogen lights, halogen globes with LEDs is brilliant in terms of energy saving, but unfortunately it's still, that upgrade still leaves the gap around the globe that allows drafts into the ceiling space, and potentially issues with insulation coverage as well. So apart from swapping your downlights to the IC4 rated sealed LEDs, another option is that you can put a downlight cover on, which is the picture on the bottom left-hand side. They're easy to get, and if you're getting insulation done in the ceiling, the insulating company can install them for you over each downlight. A special note, this is really back to draft proofing and potentially hazardous appliances. When somebody has a gas space heater, we generally don't recommend they draft proof in that room. It's not that it will be a problem, but you just never know how well people maintain their appliances and how healthy the air is that's coming out of them. So that's why we don't recommend it. If anyone has something like that, or a wood burning fire, I'd put in a carbon monoxide monitor and just make sure you're checking them and getting them cleaned and serviced. So ceiling insulation, there's two main things that everyone should know about ceiling insulation. And the first is that having gaps in coverage is actually a really big deal. It doesn't seem like it. It's one of those things that is much more of an impact than you would ever imagine. And this graph shows that if you have just 5% gaps in coverage of the total coverage of your roof space, then it halves the value of your ceiling insulation. And that means if you've got a new build house that has R4 or R4.4 insulation, but tradies have come in after it's been built and the insulation installed and moved it all around to put in downlights or, ductwork, and they haven't put it back, you might only have insulation that's functioning at half that value. So people don't look in their ceilings, and I totally understand why, but it is something to be aware of. And if you have tradies coming over, just maybe get them to take a photo before they leave showing that they've replaced it where it should be. The next... Oh, okay. So this is some images just of insulation that's well done and not so well. The top left-hand corner just shows really good thick insulation. It's obviously double layer and goes right to the edges. That's good. The middle top one, you can see that the insulation at the edges looks pretty brand new and in good quality and, reasonably thick. But there's these sections in the middle that are completely empty of insulation, which the reason is fairly obvious, because you can see the brand new saw marks in the plasterwork where an electrician has put some things in. That's a really good example of tradies coming and removing the insulation and not putting it back. And on the right-hand side, this is just, oops, sorry. Somebody said, is that for real? That's just a real house, a real roof space I saw. And to be honest, I see them quite a lot with the roof spaces like that, where the insulation is just this big higgledy-piggledy mess everywhere. So it's worth getting that sorted out. And EnviroFlex are a great insulation company. I'll answer your question in a sec, Tim, but EnviroFlex are a really great insulation company that do free quotes. They do ceiling insulation, wall insulation, and underfloor insulation. And every one of their installers has also been on the Clean Energy Council ceiling insulation installation course, which is not required, but it does that. EnviroFlex sends them so that they know that they're going to do a good job and install it well. They do offer a service where you have plenty of insulation, but it's just messy. They offer a service of just fixing up what's there. They don't necessarily need to bring you any more or add any more. They just rearrange it all so that it's laid properly. Tim says, when the ceiling insulation is squished, how do you account for that? Tim, would you be able to explain what you mean? Do you mean if
I mean,
yeah.
For example, if you have a bat and its natural loft is maybe 150 millimeters,
yeah,
and you know it's squished down to 100. I've had a situation where I've been asked to get the estimate for the R value, and you think, I don't really know the impact of squishing 150 to 100. I know it shouldn't be like that because an air aloft is important, but I don't know how significant that difference is.
Yeah, the loft, you're right, that is the critical importance of bulk insulation. I wouldn't be able to give you a figure of what that change would be, but I can say that in Scorecard, as you would probably know, we measure the height and then judge by the height and the type and then use it. That's how we calculate it.
Well,
I don't know any. What's that, sorry?
I had one house where I could see the bats out of the bag as they should be and see them in other places in the roof as they should be. But then in other places you could, it was squished under a pad of masonite or something. And it doesn't make a difference, clearly.
I've seen the same where people have had a wider bat than the space and they've just shoved it in so that it would fit the space and obviously look right to the householder, but in the process halved the height of it and just halved all of it. But that's something you could ask the Scorecard technical team. They're good with data.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right. Can you do insulation yourself? Yes, you can, but if you've ever tried it before, it's a horrible job and there's lots of hazards. One is dust, which is simply inhaling it or getting it on your skin or, the fibre of the glass fibre. Electrical safety hazards are a really big one and extremely important to be careful of. I would always turn the mains power off if I was doing any sort of insulation work in the roof or under the floor. Potentially asbestos, depending on the age of your house, and falling either off a ladder or through the roof. I have young adult children, and one of them did some labouring work and was told that it's like pretty much every labourer that gets in a roof, they fall through it the first week because they're just so unused to the fact that, it actually doesn't hold their body weight at all. He managed not to though, so that's good. I did have, there was one other thing that I mentioned that I must have taken the slide out for, but is just the diminishing value of return of insulation, which is all about the biggest return you get is when you go from no insulation or very little, say R1, to, R3, something like that. The current minimum is R4, but if you already had insulation that's R3 and it's well laid, no gaps, so we're not downgrading the R value, then you get a much smaller return on adding more. So again, if I'm in a house and somebody has reasonable R2 or R3 insulation, that would fall to the bottom of my list because they've already made the biggest impact they can with their ceiling insulation. Window improvements are one of my favourite topics because there are so many things you can do with windows. Double glazing is highly and heavily marketed, and a lot of the time I go to a house and people say, we know that our windows need improving, but we just can't afford, you know, 40 grand to get them all replaced with double glazing. And luckily, I can tell them that there are many other ways to approach it. So the different things that impact windows are the covering, so curtains or blinds, whatever you have, pelmets, glazing, frames, and external shading. We'll talk through each of them at a time. This chart is to show you the impact of pelmets and the impact of heavy line drapes. So if you look at the stars, the red star shows a single glazed window with a Holland blind, which is pretty much the most common thing that I see, and it has no pelmet. And then the same situation, single glazed window with a Holland blind with a pelmet, you can see that it's actually reduced the heat loss quite significantly. And the second example is the arrows. The red arrow shows a standard double glazed window, and then the blue arrow shows a single glazed window with a heavy lined curtain and a pelmet. You can see there that a single glazed window with a heavy lined curtain and pelmet is actually better at reducing heat flow than a standard double glazed window with no covering. So don't underestimate the value of coverings, window coverings and pelmets. They can make a massive difference. And if you have a budget, as most of us do, they are a very good way to start. Starting with window coverings, as I just said, it's a really good option. It's one of the cheaper options and you can have a massive impact. The most important, the key thing to understand about any sort of window covering is that the effectiveness of it is based on how well it reduces airflow across the glass, because air moving across the glass, either picking up heat or dropping off heat, is how the heat transfers. So any of the most thermally efficient window coverings are going to be thermally efficient because they've stopped air moving across the glass of your windows. The middle picture here just shows a heavy lined curtain. Those are good because they generally go right down to the floor, round the edges of the window. And then if you have a pelmet, it also stops any air flowing from the top. That one doesn't look like it has a pelmet, but it actually has what's called an invisible pelmet that you can see an example of in the bottom two images on the right-hand side. An invisible pelmet, it's instead of the box pelmet that a lot of people don't like because they don't like the look of it, an invisible pelmet just sits between the glass and the window covering, and it sits in the gap between and stops air either heating up in the summer and moving into the room, or the warm air from inside touching the window and cooling down. Another good option for stopping airflow is the top right-hand side picture. If you have that sort of window style that has deep reveals, then honeycombs installed inside there can be a good option. They have cells that trap air, and as long as they're fitted very neatly, they really do create quite a good barrier to airflow. Now, with glazing, it boils down to two options. One is double glazing and one is called secondary glazing. Secondary glazing is where you retain your original window with the frame and glass and everything, and you are just bringing a second pane and adding it on. You can either do it professionally or DIY. So with double glazing, you've got a few options. The marketed way is to rip out your windows with their frames and bring in new windows and frames that have double glazing. There is another couple of options. So one is that there's a lot of secondhand double glazed windows with frames on the market that have just been over ordered or were ordered the wrong size. And so you can get them sometimes pretty cheap. You just then need to either fit them yourself or get a handy person or a carpenter to do it. Another option, if you have timber frames, is to keep the frames because they're great. The timber frames are the best, and just replace the glass. That can be a brilliant option for older houses that have timber framed windows, and costs a lot less, so about $275 per square metre for the glass cut to size, not including the installation. Whereas a brand new glass, double glazed window glass and frame is going to be about $1,000 a square metre. Professional secondary glazing is done by a bunch of companies. Some of them will only work with timber framed windows. Some will work with any kind, including old style aluminium and steel framed windows. So check what each one does. It's about half the cost of the removing the windows and putting in new frames with double glazing. So it's still expensive, about $450 a square metre, but you end up with an extremely professional look, and everything works. They make sure they don't leave without all the bits of the windows still working properly. Then you get to cheaper options, secondary glazing, DIY basically. And the guy at the top is putting on a second panel onto a timber frame window using clear acrylic sheeting. The reason it has that papery bit on it is just that's how it comes to stop it getting scratched. But you cut it to size, screw it onto the window frame, and then peel off that covering. And you've got pretty much two panels, one glass, one clear acrylic with a gap of air in between, and it works really well. But the picture at the bottom is an example of that done in a house, and in this case it is attached with timber beading. You do need handy person skills to be able to do that kind of job though. Then you've got the really cheap DIY secondary glazing options, the cheapest of which would be using bubble wrap, which I think is becoming a little bit more popular. And it's not pretty, but imagine you're, in a share house or in a rental that you can't do anything, or you're just really suffering from a freezing cold house. Bubble wrap is probably going to be a really nice option. The picture on the right-hand side is of a person that writes for Renew magazine, renew.org.au, moved into a rental house that had aluminium framed windows with single glazing, and she wanted to improve them but obviously couldn't do anything because it wasn't her house. So she created frames made of the metal edgings of a fly screen that you'd make a fly screen with, and then got a clear plastic tablecloth and pushed it all in with foam and created these removable panels that give her the same thing. It's a panel over the window that gives her a still airspace. And then the middle picture is an example of something called, the one brand is called Clear Comfort. If you want to look that up online, you can see the website and how it works. It's pretty much a clear, thin sheet of plastic. Around your window frame, you put some double-sided tape, stick the plastic on, and then use a hairdryer and shrink it. And again, it creates a still airspace, and it works really well. Considered temporary because I guess it's very lightweight. If you had cats and they were clawing on it, it would break, but it does work really well in a lot of instances. Onto frames. Frames do make a really big difference to the thermal efficiency of windows. And that's because things like aluminium and steel, they transfer heat themselves. So even if you have double glazing, but you have one of those as a frame, you're getting a benefit from the double glaze, but then losing out a bit with the metal that's transferring heat really well. And timber or UPVC is going to be the best option. Of course, the worst option is single glazed windows with an aluminium frame, and the best is double glazed with a timber or UPVC frame. I've talked a little bit about the costs already. So, $800 to $1,000 for the brand new everything. Professional secondary glazing, $450-ish. Just the double glazed glass into existing timber windows, around $275-ish. And then DIY secondary glazing, it depends really on whether you can self-install or not. But if you could, it would be, actually, yeah, $100 to $150 per metre square if you get someone else to install. And then Clear Comfort film is the cheapest by a long shot. All right, shading. In summer, Double glazing won't help you at all. It doesn't reduce any impact of direct sunlight coming in through the window. So you really need external shading anywhere where heat gain is an issue with sunlight touching the window. The picture I've got there is probably my favourite version of it, which is a deciduous vine, but it can be any physical block. Generally, for north-facing windows, then horizontal is the most effective, but then for east-west windows, you really want vertical because that's when the sun is either rising or going down and will be beating at those windows from the side. And when you do have direct sunlight on glass, for every metre square, it's said it's the equivalent of a bar radiator on in that room. So that's how important it is to sort that out. Wall insulation is these days very easy to install by having it pumped in through your weatherboards or brickwork. Even in a double brick home, it can be done. And that insulation company that I mentioned a little while ago, enviroflex.com.au, they do this pump-in wall insulation. It's quite brilliant. We've had it done at our place, and they came and did it within, you know, a few hours. I actually hoped it would be longer so I could watch them, but I missed most of it. And yeah, they go away, all the holes are patched, and there you go. It's like putting a jumper on your house. Underfloor insulation is also brilliant. The importance of it depends on the style of the house. We're on a hill on stilts with lots of air movement under our house, and we just had floorboards, no other floor coverings at all. So for us, it was shunted quite high up the list because of that huge airflow beneath. But if you have a house that's on a flat surface and maybe it's bricked in at the sides and not much space between the floor and the ground, it's less important. Or if you have carpets or floating floorboards, things like that, that all makes it less important to do underfloor insulation. Now, with energy using appliances, the ones that we generally look at are the main ones. Whilst other things like tallies and computers and that, they all use energy, but in comparison to these big ones, it's quite little. So that's why we focus on these and work out how to make these as good as possible. Heating, as we saw in that other chart, is the biggest use of energy that we have. Just going to close that. So there's some wonderful charts on Sustainability Victoria that will show you for heaters, for coolers, for hot water systems. They'll give you an overview of all the different kinds and show you how they compare, basically. And this one also shows you how they compare for just heating a room and how they compare for heating a house. It happens that reverse cycle air conditioning is the most cost-effective for either option. And that is, yeah, it's without a doubt the cheapest and most efficient way to heat in Victoria. Building shell upgrades, so all of the things we talked about before, will all reduce your heating cost as well, because the warm air that you're generating is going to stay in your house better. And there's a brilliant new Victorian government rebate for low-income households of 90,000 or less for replacing older or gas, wood, or plug-in electric heating, or even reverse cycle air conditioners older than 7 years. They will give you $1,000 off the purchase and install of a new reverse cycle air conditioner, and they have some additional amounts they'll give you if you need to cap off a gas heater or update your meter box in order to be able to install that new reverse cycle system. So that's a really good one. I think the link is under there, but if feel free to ask me, I can send through the link to that. Or if you look up Vic heater rebate, you should find it as well. Now, things that you can do that don't have anything to do with replacing a heating system are setting the thermostat. It's, you know, when you're driving a car and it has a sort of sweet spot where it drives the most efficiently, heaters are like that as well. And the thermostat in winter, ideally, you'd want to keep it between 18 and 20 and just dress to, you know, to fit the season. Heating by zone that we've already discussed. Also, cleaning and servicing appliances. The bottom middle picture shows a dirty filter on a reverse cycle air conditioner. And I'm always surprised the amount of people that don't realize that they have filters. Some houses that I've been to have had, say, it's been the height of summer, they've had an air conditioner on and everyone's sweltering. And as soon as I walk in, I'm sweltering. And they say, yeah, it just doesn't work very well. I open up the lid and it's so thick with dust that it can't work well. You just wash it off with some warm soapy water, put it back in, and suddenly you've got an air conditioner again that's pumping out cool air. So I can't promote that enough. Please spread the word that air conditioners have filters. The picture above that is a ducted, probably gas ducted heating system, and it's showing that it's connected to really old ductwork. You can probably imagine that that's losing warm air through the ductwork. And this was actually a house, somebody that I went to who had just had their ducted heating system replaced, the actual unit. And she said to them, can you just check the ductwork? And I want to make sure it's okay. And they said, no, if it's not blowing cold air, it's fine. And they didn't even look. And when I got there, she said, look, can you just have a peek and tell me if it's all right? And that's what it was like. So it's really important if you're going to have something like ducted that you do have good ductwork and get it checked for leaks. At the right-hand side is my personal favourite, which is a personal heating device. The old-fashioned version is a hot water bottle and an electric blanket. They're extremely cheap to run, electric blankets. And these days there are all these fancy other versions, including heated seat pads and heated rugs that you can wear, heated sort of, middle warmers, heated socks. And imagine that allows you to heat your body instead of the room around you. That's why they're so efficient, because the room can be still quite cool, but you're toasty and warm. With cooling, the same sort of chart is on Sustainability Victoria. Ceiling fans are by far the cheapest option. Ducted evaporative cooling is also a cheap option, but my personal feeling is that our weather is changing to become more humid, and I'm expecting to have bigger periods of really hot days, and both of those things reduce the effectivity of evaporative cooling. So my personal choice would be ceiling fans and reverse cycle air conditioners for cooling. Again, building shell upgrades are going to reduce your need for cooling. Cooling tips: fans of any kind, setting the thermostat, but this time setting it a bit higher and dressing for the season, cooling by zone, cleaning and servicing machines, and using ventilation whenever you can, especially after a hot day, to get hot air out of the house. With hot water systems, the same graph will show you, and I'm guessing that you guys will know this because of the course you're doing, but the most expensive type of hot water system is a traditional resistive electric hot water system on either a peak tariff or even an off-peak tariff is way more expensive than anything else. Technically, the cheapest option is a solar system with a natural gas boost, but given that a lot of us are aiming to get off gas, it is becoming more and more sensible to install heat pumps. They're basically the hot water version of a reverse cycle air conditioner. It's the same technology. They're super efficient. And the other thing is that if you have a heat pump instead of solar hot water, you can leave all your roof space for solar panels and then time the heat pump, if it has a booster, to run to boost when your solar panels are generating their electricity. How to make hot water most efficient is, well, shower heads are a massive one. Sometimes that can make hundreds of dollars of difference, going from a 20 litre a minute shower head to an 8 litre a minute one. So go for the Wells 3-star shower heads. They are also available free under the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme. So you can organise one of those to be come and installed for you. Then lagging of the pipes, that means insulating of the pipes. And that black stuff that you can see around the pipes is a really nice, thick, foamy insulation that should be around all hot water pipes from where it leaves the hot water system, ideally to where it goes into your shower, like into the house. But even if you just do it on the bits of pipe that are outside the house, that's going to be good. Other appliances, generally we don't look at them as scorecard assessors, but they can be big costs depending on the appliance. And really the key is generally how old they are. Things like fridges are often the next biggest cost than the main ones that we look at. And older fridges can be very expensive to run, like cost $1,000 a year to have your, 20, 30-year-old fridge that's in the garage for the beer. The newer the fridge, the better. Basically anything that's less than 7 years old is super efficient. And there's a wonderful energy rating calculator that you can look up. If you're in the market for a fridge, the key with a star rating is you first work out what you need, what size you need. So do you need a 600-litre fridge? And then you compare the star ratings of different options. And each star rating that you get higher will be less running costs for you for the next, 10 years or so. Solar, I know that you're actually, yes, I'm realizing you're doing an entire solar, or already have done an entire solar presentation. So I might just skip through this because, is that right? Tim, can you tell me you've already covered solar completely?
In a detailed sense, yes. This is kind of summary in a way. And
yeah, okay, I'll just talk through it again.
We went through some pretty complicated scenarios and setups.
Yeah.
Out at the the solar expert who lives out in the bush.
Yeah.
Glenn Morris, that was.
Yes,
Yeah. I think it's worth doing again, Lucinda.
Yeah. Okay, great. So solar electricity, usually these days, the prices come down so much that it's worthwhile for almost anybody. The only reason it wouldn't be is if you had massive shading on your roof, or if you're about, we're only going to live there another year and then leave. The payback is between 3 and 5 years, typically, not always. But if you get an approved solar retailer to have a look, that's the highest level of solar retail you can get in terms of reputable retailers. They can give you an extremely accurate payback figure based on your current bills. Any north, east or west roof space is usually okay for solar as well. It used to be that we'd only do north, but now all of them is fine. The current solar VIC rebate is $1,400, and there's also a $1,400 interest-free loan you can apply for to help cover any out-of-pocket costs. And the approved supplier scheme, to get the VIC government rebate, you have to use an approved supplier anyway. Even if you aren't eligible for that rebate, I always would. And to find out more about that scheme, you can go to the Clean Energy Council website and just look up approved solar retailer, and it'll explain all about it and how to find one. This is a picture from our solar system. We have quite a small solar system and quite a shady roof. And we knew that before we installed it, but we wanted to install it anyway. This shows I'm not sure how many of you have solar, but in general, the best way to use it is to shift whatever electricity you're using to the times that you're generating electricity with your solar system. In this picture, that's the section that is blue and green. So the blue is where we've generated solar electricity and used it, and the green is all of the leftover that we haven't used and is being exported. Whereas the red is energy that we've imported, probably after, in the evening when we're no longer generating energy. So if there are certain peaks that you can see that regularly occur at your place, you might go, what was I doing then? Maybe I can do that in the green bit instead and make use of that, pretty much free energy. You don't need to regularly clean panels, but just keep an eye on them and make sure they're not getting too grotty or not too much sort of moss growing on them. And monitoring things like trees. Over 5 years, trees can really increase in size. And if they're shadowing your system, you might just want to get them trimmed. There's lots of help available to us, luckily, to help work out how we're using energy and what we can do about it. So tracking Actually, I think I've got these. Yes, I've got these all in separate slides. So there's tracking our own energy use, comparing our energy rates, looking into all the rebates and incentives that are available. There's lots, especially for us in Victoria, and potentially getting a home energy efficiency assessment. So with tracking your own energy use, the first thing you need to know is who your distributor is. So not the company you buy the electricity from, but the one that does, the one that sends you the notices saying the electricity is being turned off on such and such a day. They're the distributor. They pretty much all have a free portal that you can log into with information from your bill, and they'll give you very detailed data about what your energy use is. And you can also compare it from day to day, week to week, month to month, to see if you can see current common sort of factors. Like, for example, if you have an electric hot water system, you'll see a massive boost in electricity use, probably from about midnight till 2 a.m. every day. And that's one way that I can work out if somebody has that sort of system remotely, if I can get a look at one of these charts. So I think everybody should sign up to this. It's a great way of understanding what's going on in your house. Then there's the free home energy monitor, which is basically the same thing. It's free under the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme. There's a PowerPal and other brands. It doesn't really matter, from what I know, which one you get, but an electrician comes and installs it on your meter box, and you can track your energy use again, but this time using a smartphone app. I think that everyone should compare their electricity and gas rates every year. When you join a company, they'll always give you a nice sweet deal, and then within a year they've added on costs and it's risen and everything. So it's just worth checking regularly to see that you're getting a good deal. If you haven't, claim the $250 power saving bonus. I'm guessing probably people on this thing will have. A lot of people have these days, but it's open to every Victorian household, so spread the word about that as well. There are plenty of rebates and financial incentives. Like I said, we're very lucky being in Victoria because we have more than any other state. We've got the Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme that offers all those things to the right, the pictures on the right, plus more. And this is where you apply for them and someone comes and installs them in your home for you. So you don't need to do it yourself. Then there are two types of certificates, energy efficiency certificates you can claim for larger installations. So things like hot water systems and reverse cycle air conditioners and solar systems. One is the Victorian one, the Victorian Energy Efficiency Certificate, VEC, and the other is the STC, it's a federal one, Small Scale Technology Certificates. Depending on what you're installing, you may be eligible for both. So if you're getting a quote, make sure you've found out if it's eligible and if the person giving you a quote is able to offer them to you. Not everybody is. So I personally think it's easier to go with someone who can offer that. You could be missing out on quite a few $100s if they're not able to. Then there's bank and home loan incentives. There haven't been for a while, but just recently some have been coming on board, and Bank Australia is one of them that has a range of different home loan incentives for clean energy home loans. Some of them use Scorecard as a indicator. So for example, one of them is if you manage to increase your Scorecard rating by 1 star, then you're eligible for their lower home loan rate. And then, of course,
yes.
Yes.
There's a request that we have a 5-minute break. It's actually 10 minutes past 8. So
Yep.
it'd be worthwhile thinking about that fairly soon.
Yes, I've got 2 slides to go, and then we'll be finished this presentation. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And then we'll have a break.
In your hand.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So this is really all of the things that we've talked about. There is plenty of information out there that you can research all of it yourself and work out what to do. One of the benefits of getting a professional home energy efficiency assessment is just that person has seen hundreds of houses potentially. They've seen all different configurations and ways to do things, and they can simplify it for you. A lot of what I find when I go to someone's house is that they say, look, I know that I need to do this and this and this and this, but I don't know where to start. I don't know what it costs. It's too much for me to make a beginning. And so that's what an assessment can offer you. And that's what we're going to be looking at for the second part of this presentation, which is all about Scorecard, how it works, if you're interested in it as a career path, how you would do that. And also, all of you can enter the draw to win a free Scorecard assessment, which the way you enter it is just simply by filling in a presentation survey about this presentation and submitting it, and then you're in the running to win that. So I am going, my last slide is just saying any questions, but it's up to you. We can have some questions now, or we can wait. We could have a break. Actually, let's have a break. And then when we come back, we'll see if there's any questions on the first part before we move into the second part. How does that sound?
Yeah, I think there also is a question. Could we have a brief chat before you leave regarding the free Scorecard energy efficiency assessment? I need to provide info to Pakenham and Emerald to see if they are okay with this offer.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry. No, that was an old message. Forget that.
Yeah. 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 All right. So should we have a break then and come back? Is 5 minutes the usual break?
Yeah, 5 minutes should be fine.
5 minutes?
Yeah.
So I have it at, what time do I have it at? I've got 8:13. So what about if we say 8:20? Yeah? Okay. See you back here at 8:20. So this section is a bit shorter, but it's on the residential efficiency scorecard, which I mentioned before. It was developed by the Victorian government maybe 8 years ago and is now being used across Australia. And it really was developed to fill a bit of a gap where there wasn't a rating tool, a standardised rating tool for existing homes. So this one was developed specifically for existing homes, but it can be used for new homes as well. It focuses on where is the NATA's star rating, the one that is for a new build and that you have to get a minimum of 6. That's really focusing on the building shell, whereas the scorecard is looking at both the building shell and the fixed appliances. So it's looking at that actual construction, actual things that have been put in and how much they're going to cost. So it gives your home a star rating out of 10, a bit like a washing machine would say this washing machine is going to cost you this much to run annually based on the average usage. That's what a scorecard does as well. It's delivered by accredited assessors and there are quite strict quality controls. The Victorian government did that very much on purpose because there have been a couple of attempts at home energy rating systems that haven't been very, very stringently monitored, which resulted in a system that wasn't that great. And I'm thinking of the Green Loan Scheme, if anyone remembers that. So this one has been very careful about making sure there are very strict controls on the people that conduct them. The reason it was developed was because, as we know, Australian homes often they perform really poorly, they're uncomfortable, our bills are high and getting higher, and we have a lot of carbon emissions because of all those things. The main thing that I hear as feedback from people is that I've mentioned it before, but they can list a whole lot of potential solutions to things that are going on, but they don't understand how they all work together and they don't know how to proceed. So often they don't do anything because they're waiting to try and know what the starting point is. The other thing is that research shows clearly that people need to feel that it's a trusted system, so that if they get told certain things, that it is actually reliable and trustworthy. And so the scorecard was developed to basically give people the advice they need and trusted recommendations. there are many ways a scorecard can help. I think from my experience, the most common one is probably comfort, and or high energy bills. So someone might have really high energy bills, but their comfort's okay, and they want to know how to reduce their energy bills. Or they might say, no, the bills are fine, but it's just freezing in winter and we need to fix something. So those are the ones I see all the time. Also, people renovating, they might be going to renovate, and if they're really clever, they will get something like a scorecard done, because by the time you've already done the renovation and potentially made more mistakes, it's even harder to try and fix them up. So before you go and do a big renovation is a brilliant time to learn how to avoid the pitfalls that you might get into. The other reasons is these are still developing because Scorecard is reasonably new. If you're renting or selling a home, then technically you could get a scorecard to really portray the features and benefits of your home if it's got a high energy efficiency. Or if you're buying and renting, you could compare, if you're looking to buy a 3-bedroom home in a certain area, you could compare different homes and different star ratings. And sometimes people will say, my bills are fine and it's comfortable, but I just want to do everything I possibly can to be better for the environment. So that's why I want to do it. And that's very refreshing, to be honest. Usually it's a bit of a combination of all of those things. There's very consistently high feedback on scorecard assessments. They're doing constant surveys to see what people thought of them. And generally people are very happy. And I think that comes back to having stringent quality controls on the people that do them. An assessment works in a bit of a flow. So the first thing is you just ring up and find out what it is and make a booking for somebody to come and see you. The assessor would then come to your home. Usually it's between an hour and a half and 3 hours, sometimes 3.5 hours, depending on how big the home is, how complicated it is, and also how much the householder is curious about their options. Some want to talk through everything and have, a list of 20 questions before you get there, and others would rather wait for the report. So then that conversation is going to be shorter. When the assessor visits the home, they first of all will just find out about the home, the people that live there, how it works, what sort of things they use appliance-wise. Then they will do a walk around the house and collect information about the house construction, the drafts, windows, walls, insulation, and all of the main fixed appliances. And they put it into the scorecard tool, which lets them get a draft report. And then they sit down together again with the householder to talk through the draft report from top to bottom, explain the rating that it is, and explain all of the recommendations that come with the report. So the assessor should be good enough and experienced enough with what they're doing that they can do that on the spot and at least give general ideas of what can be done. After the assessor goes home, they double check all their data entry and make sure they have their evidence uploaded. And then they would just, write a report generally, which has a lot more detailed information. And then they would send it all on to the householder within a week. These are the types of things that are looked at. I've already covered these, so I might just skip over that one. But the one thing is, though, that we don't record things like fridges and washing machines, because this scorecard is about the house itself, not the people living there. And we assume that they're going to be taking all that with them. So it's only the things that are fixed into the house. Oh, here's where I have more information about what would be done at the house. So there's bits where it's talking and there's bits where it's collecting information that you can do on your own, and then you end up talking again. There's a lot of people skills involved. There's technical know-how that's required, but also a really good ability to just connect with the people that live there and find out what matters to them and how you can make the best recommendations for them. I've covered these as well. Sorry, I've done it in a roundabout way because this presentation is a bit new to me. I'm going to talk through the scorecard certificate bit by bit. It's a 2-page certificate, and that's the front and the back page. The top part is the actual star rating, and that's the cost running rating for a house. And I mentioned that the average 3-star house costs roughly $1,800 a year just to run the main fixed appliances. So not anything else that you've brought into the house, but just the main fixed ones. A 1-star house can be more than $5,000. A 6-star house is around $800. An 8-star house is about $250 only for the main fixed appliances. And then a 10-star house, you can only get above 8. So you can only get 9 or 10 if you have a solar PV system on the roof generating energy. 9 stars represents that you're generating roughly the equivalent dollar value of energy than you are spending on energy. And 10 stars means that you're generating more than the equivalent dollar value. So technically you should have net positive costs. The second part of the scorecard is the most like the NATA's rating. That it's the section of it that's most like the NATA's rating, because it's looking at how comfortable the house is likely to be in hot or cold weather if there was no heating or cooling on. So imagine that you got total blackout and you're completely relying on the building itself. How comfortable is it likely to be? And to be honest, most of the houses I see would get 1 out of 5 stars, 5 bars for both hot and cold weather comfort rating. And really, you know, we should be at least at 4 to give ourselves a good chance of not spending too much heating and cooling. The bottom of the first page is the rating with and without solar PV. So what that means is if you already have a solar system, this section will show you the rating, the overall rating, and what it would be without the solar system. The reason that's important is because sometimes if you've got a really big solar system, that the generation of energy from that is making it look like your home is really energy efficient. Whereas say if your rating with a solar system is 8 stars, and if you take it off, it's 4, then you've actually got between 4 stars and 8 stars that you could improve the building shell and the main fixed appliances, because that's as high as you can get without solar. That's why that rating, that comparison is put on there, to allow you to see what part of your energy efficiency you could still improve without falling back on solar. If you don't have solar, this bit shows how your rating would change if you put on quite a small solar system, only 2.5 kilowatts, which is smaller, I think, than even the smallest one people would get. Mostly, I think generally the smallest people get these days is 3. But even just with a 2.5 kilowatt solar system, you can see that this home, this example home star rating goes up 2 stars, which is quite significant. And that's from that generation. And then the back page of the certificate is dedicated to the main fixed appliances. And it shows 2 things. There's a bar graph on the left, and those show how efficient is that appliance compared to the most efficient on the market in that area. So an example of this is for the cooling. You see how it's got ducted evaporative cooling. It won't compare against a ducted evaporative cooling system in all areas, because if it's a tropical climate and it's humid, you wouldn't put in a ducted evaporative cooler. So it's only comparing against things that are typical and available and common in that area, in that climate zone, I should say. Then the pie graphs on the right show what percentage of your fixed energy costs are likely to be attributable to that particular appliance. In this example, you can see that the natural gas ducted heating system, it's 3 out of 5 bars. So it's sort of average efficiency compared to what could be got for heating in this area. And it's contributing about almost half of the home's fixed energy costs. You can read them together a bit as well, that if something is extremely inefficient, like an old box air conditioner that's only 1 bar out of 5, but it only uses 2% of your energy, it's also not going to be the first priority to change, because it's not a big enough portion of your energy to worry about as much. all assessors go through very rigorous training and a process to become accredited. So the training, first of all, you have to apply to be entered into the system. Once you've done that, and there's a range of ways you can do that, which is the next couple of slides away, I think. So you do that, then you do training in how the scorecard tool works, which is quite complicated. It's something that I feel like you just keep learning about the more you delve into it. But Scorecard is a very technical tool, and it does all sorts of calculations behind the scenes. So part of it is helping you understand, if you've done a draft certificate for someone, why is it given them this many stars? Why is it recommending the things that it has? There are reasons for all of that, and you need to be able to explain them to the householder properly. You have to pass a written examination, an oral examination, where you do a role play as if you were in a house and you were advising someone on the results of their scorecard. Also, all assessors are audited regularly. So what that means is that the auditors will get sent a set of 3 scorecards that someone has done, and they audit them and double check that all of the evidence uploaded and the notes and everything matches and looks correct. And if there are too many things wrong, then they go back to the assessor and say, hang on a sec, you've got to, lift your game here, because this is not correct. If there's any conflict of interest, then the assessor has to declare it at the beginning of the assessment. And by that, I mean, for example, they're an assessor, but they also work for a draft proofing company. They have to let the householder know, because we don't want people being recommended stuff that's in the interest of somebody and they're not aware of it. And they can have their accreditation cancelled, mainly if things are identified in auditing that aren't then satisfactorily resolved. Oh. What was that little sound? I'm not sure. So Scorecard, as I mentioned, was originally just Victorian, but it's now all Australian governments. There's a Scorecard team that is quite small, but actually all lovely, and they manage the Scorecard tool. There's a couple of tech people that do that, and also just the quality of assessors coming through by maintaining all that, all the records of the training, auditing and consumer surveys to make sure people are still reporting good feedback about Scorecard. They're also making sure all of the data is kept private, and providing information on the Scorecard website so that people can look at it and get tips. These pictures just show how Scorecard can be used on real estate advertising. It's not happening so much yet, but it's something the Scorecard team would love to get happening. And you may be aware that in the ACT, it's actually required to get an energy efficiency assessment before you rent or sell a house. There's been talk about something similar here, mandatory disclosure, for many years, but it's getting louder and louder, and a lot of people are saying that it's not going to be long now, because if you think of it, our houses are and running our houses are, besides cars, they're the other biggest expense that we can possibly have, and people need to know how to reduce that expense. So having that done means that people can buy into a house knowing what they're buying into. The finance sector, I mentioned in the last thing, is really beginning to engage in energy efficiency, and with all the loans that are available, and more are coming on board all the time. Also, Scorecard team is working, trying to make partnerships with banks and other companies to give more benefits for Scorecard. There are local governments using it. There are several councils around Melbourne that have been organising free or subsidised home energy assessments for people in their council areas, and financial incentives to go along with them. So Banyule Council's been doing it, Moonee Valley City Council and others. And other states are starting to do the same thing now, which is brilliant. There are 6 ways you can enter the Scorecard Assessor accreditation process, and they're listed on that picture, but really they are more easily broken into three. One is if you're completely new to home energy assessment. The second, third, fourth, and fifth are all when people have done some sort of training, and they could be different courses in home sustainability assessing, but it's all with pre-existing training. And then the last of those 6 images is someone who's potentially never done any training, but they've been doing this sort of thing for a long time. Remember, it's an industry that has never really existed before. So if somebody's been interested in it for the last 20 years, they've probably got every experience they could need, but there was no formal training for them to have done. And they can still apply as well. So these are those ways. If you are completely new to the industry, then there are 4 accredited specified units that you have to do. You can do them online, and there's a few different RTOs that offer them. And they're about energy assessing and building shell performance, things like that. Then if you do hold one of those recognised qualifications, you don't need to do those 4 units. And if you're an experienced home energy assessor already without training, you've just got to show evidence of what you can do. For example, you might send a few energy assessments you've done for somebody to prove that you do know what you're talking about and can give a good service. So once you enter, those are the ways you enter into the program. Then you move to stage 2, which is when you get trained in the Scorecard software itself and the program. So how it works, what it means, what the whole point of it is, and so you can explain to householders as well how privacy is respected and that sort of thing. And you've got to pass a training test on the Scorecard software. Stage 3, you will complete several practice assessments at home using a training software, and you upload a couple, and you get they get looked at by an auditor who gives you feedback on things that you might have missed, and says refer to the manual, this page, and this will explain how to enter this particular thing. Stage 4 is where you do an online written exam and then the online oral exam. And then basically, if you've passed all of that, the final stage is just all the bureaucratic stuff, submitting evidence of your safe work method statement, your insurance, that you've done OHS training and assigned the agreement, that sort of thing. What has been found is that if someone is really, really onto it, they can complete all of this in 6 to 8 weeks. It's more common that it would take something like 3 months. And if you were taking longer than 3 months, it's probably better to speed it up a bit, because you do forget things. Like if you've done the Scorecard software training 3 months ago, you might have forgotten some of how to use it, and you don't necessarily want to go and do an online oral exam when you've forgotten. So it's better to do it reasonably quickly if you can. There's a new Scorecard website, which has only just come out in the last couple of months, which is excellent because there's never really been a marketing budget till now. And now that it's a national tool, this has all happened. Besides the website, there's also a Facebook page and a LinkedIn page that have a lot of information. They'll show you lots more about how the scorecard works and how you can become a scorecard assessor. Those are the Facebook and LinkedIn, and a couple of our wonderful assessors. You'll find that most of the assessors are absolutely lovely, and they really like helping people and creative thinkers. That's what I've found anyway. I really enjoy it. So if you'd like any more information about becoming a scorecard assessor or booking an assessment, feel free to contact me, or of course you can contact the Scorecard team. So at this point, that's the end. Actually, I'll move forwards onto the QR code. I can also put, actually, just one sec, I'm going to grab another link to the survey so that you can fill that out. Chat. Somehow I can't copy it. look, if you can't use the QR code, let me know and I'll type in the link to the survey in the chat. I just can't seem to copy it. But does anyone have any questions on any of the above? It could have been on home energy efficiency in any of its aspects, or on how to become a scorecard assessor.
Lucinda, I just wanted to say I'm doing that training now and up
Oh,
to,
where are you? Yeah.
up to house inspections, so sample
Yes.
house inspections. And
Yeah.
it's quite eye-opening doing it by yourself. It's quite interesting.
Yeah.
It's quite challenging. And things
Yeah.
like, you know, what do you do with the rating for insulation when the insulation is squished in the ceiling?
Yeah. Yeah. I
It's hard to
agree.
know
There's a
where to make a qualitative or quantitative assessment.
And really, there are two answers to that. One is manual. Well, I could say 6 answers, and the first 5 are manual. Go to the manual, because it's very clear about how to do things, and that's what they want you to do. They don't want you to they don't want you to think, well, this is what I think it should be. They want you just to go by the manual rules. And the other thing is the help at Scorecard email address is a help. It's a help desk. And I know that I mean, I've been doing this. I think I've looked at over 600 houses. I still use it. I've used the help email 3 times already this week of things, that I just don't know. Like, I found one house had a hydronic heating / hot water system combined, and I didn't know how to enter that hot water system in as a star rating. So just use help.
I was in a house in Fitzroy, and it's got thick brick walls.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really qualify as double brick in some respects. It's double brick in terms of width, but it's not got a gap in the middle because it's built in the 1930s.
Right.
I'm not sure if I've put in that right, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. I feel like you'll never run out of things that you're not sure how to enter, because people are endlessly creative with how they build their houses, and just the difference in age of houses.
Yes. And you get into a 400 by 400 millimeter square manhole at 3.4 meters high.
Yeah.
Quite a challenge.
Yep. And I've seen, I've seen old houses where the original roof was meters high, and then there's been a false ceiling added. And then it's like, well, where should the insulation be in a place like that? Does it go on the top of the false ceiling, or on the top of the other one, or both?
Yeah.
There's just so many potentially complicated things to find out. But do you find it interesting?
Oh yeah, it's quite fun, but it's challenging. I like intellectual challenge puzzles.
Yeah.
And, it's going to help somebody, so that's all very positive.
And you'll never get bored either.
No problems there.
No. Yeah. Have any of the rest of you got any questions?
Yes, I've got one. So Mike here, just wondering the cost of a home energy audit normally?
Yeah, so every scorecard assessor can set, whoops, I think I've just changed the thing. Every scorecard assessor can set their own rates. Generally, I would say, now, I can tell you my rates. I would say they're probably fairly average for an experienced assessor, which is for a 3-bedroom house, $420. And then for a 2-bedroom, it's $380, and a 4+ bedroom, it's $485. And that would include the site visit, which is also the length of that site visit depends on the size of the house. So a 2-bedroom will be more like an hour and a half, but a 4+ bedroom is more likely to be 3. And then the writing of the report, and so you get the report, the certificate, and then any follow-up help. So that's roughly, you know.
Mhm.
Sometimes I do notice that people have, you know, they might say they'll do it for $120 or something, but I just don't know how you could do that and do a proper job, because it, you know, takes an hour or two to write the report once you get home. So, yeah. Does that answer the question well enough? There's no set fee, so.
No, that's good. And I when you were talking before about the government website where you can plug in to find out what the cheapest power for your house is, I'm mindful of that. You know, I've been through that. I've been part of the way through that process and had a look at the companies that they're offering to compare.
Yeah.
And I don't like half of them. You know, ethically, I don't like half of them. And I'm wondering where you go then, you know, because a lot of them I wouldn't want to go with a company like Origin, for example.
Yes. So then you go to the Green Electricity Guide. Have you heard of it? I'll put it Green Electricity Guide. I'm just putting it in the chat. And if you Google that, it's made by Greenpeace, but it rates power companies on their environmental performance. And so it's not a cost rating at all, but it's rating them in that way. And I know that that's how I choose I don't use the compare site to get the cheapest deal. I'm going to go to that other one.
But I guess you could use the compare site to get the rebate and still choose whatever you like.
Oh, yeah. Well, you don't even need to do the comparison to get the rebate. You just apply for it.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that often you will get a match between a low rate and an ethical company. They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. So I don't mind to dominate this discussion, but we're at the ethical stage right now where we have what we think is a fairly energy efficient house. It was designed that way. But, you know, back when it's over 10 years old and we got solar, gas boosted solar electric water, we've got a gas stove because that was at the time the best way to go. But we're desperate now to get rid of fossil fuels from our life.
Yeah.
And we approached a company a while ago to see, you know, what would it cost to upgrade our solar gas boosted system. And he said, go to a heat pump system. And I said, how much would that cost? And he said, $6,000. And I'm just wondering, I'm hoping that there's some better offer, that there's some better way of going about it, but not according to the person that came out.
What brand was that, could I ask?
I haven't got it at the top of my head. No, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't say. I'm not sure. Sorry.
Yeah. So look, the thing with heat pumps are there are companies that will offer them free, but there's a certain government rebate, a set amount that you'll get to upgrade to a heat pump. And the ones that offer it free are then buying it, installing it, and making money for that government rebate, and they're limited to that. And their systems aren't anywhere near as good. And for example, they'll have booster elements because they're not efficient in them. They're not efficient enough in themselves to be able to generate the hot water you need. So when you pay out of pocket, what you're paying for is a system that's better quality, that most likely won't have a booster element. Like the Reclaim system doesn't have a booster element because it doesn't need one. It's really good already. So you're saving money there. And also things like warranties will be different potentially with those higher cost ones. So 6,000 sounds, I would have thought more like 4.5 for something like a Reclaim, but it could be that you were speaking with Sandon, that I think is do you know this, Jeff?
The Sandon and the Reclaim pumps are pretty much the same in terms of their technical efficiency. They're both at the top of the market. And what you've said about the efficiency is what needs to be taken into account. Some of the systems are a little better than electric hot water systems in wintertime. They don't really heat the water when you get down to near freezing, whereas the more efficient ones do. And that all needs to be taken into account. The other thing is that there's the retail price of the product, but then there are deductions for things like carbon credits and the Victorian government rebates that you can get as well, that get deducted from the retail price, that bring the price down from, let's say, $5,000 to $3,000 or $3,500. And if you've got, say, evacuated tubes on your roof that are and a gas boosted evacuated tube system, then you've got a tank which is, if it's in good condition, can still be used for a heat pump.
Well, I didn't realise you could attach. No, if you can attach a heat pump to something like that, then that would be ideal for us because we've got the tank.
Yeah.
I got that information from the managing director of Reclaim Energy, because I also have evacuated tubes on my roof, and it's gas boosted, and the system was put in before the very efficient heat pumps were introduced, and they were very noisy when I installed my system. And Chris Taylor, the MD, said, yes, if the tank is in good condition, you can still use it.
Oh, good. That's really good to hear.
Brilliant. Yeah. I didn't know that either. Yeah.
So Reclaim is a proprietary company. So just got to contact it. Yeah. Okay.
It's a brand name.
Hillsville Core is working in conjunction with Reclaim Energy. And if you go onto the Hillsville Core website, you can put in an expression of interest, and that will go to Chris Taylor. And he will handle that.
Oh, thanks for that. You've made my night.
Yeah, me too, Jeff, because I've got the exact same system. Now, can I just check that everyone has been able to access that QR code in the survey? Because I don't want anyone to miss out on the opportunity to enter.
I haven't been able to. My phone doesn't work.
Okay. All right. Let me see again.
Lucinda.
I'm just going to type. I'll have to type it in because I can't copy it, but let me see if I can do this.
All right. Oh yeah, I've got it on your phone. So it should be
okay.
To that.
Let me make sure that works. Yes, that works.
The presentation evaluation form.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So now I've lost track of what I'm sharing with you, but I'll also put my email address in the chat.
What you're sharing with us at the moment is the scorecard at delp.vic.gov.au, and further information, the website www.homescorecard.gov.au.
Okay.
So if there are no more slides, you could actually stop.
No, there aren't any more. I was just going to go back to the one with my contact, but I'll put that in the chat. Now, I know that our time's up, but I also know that there was some homework, and I'm more than happy. I don't know if it's okay, Jeff, but we could stick around if people or any of the people participating would like to talk through that and how they found it, or if they have questions.
No, we're finishing all sessions on time.
Okay.
Yeah, if people
Yeah.
would like to communicate with you offline, or you want to give them a phone number to have a phone conversation,
Sure.
fine.
Yep. Yep.
But we do need to finish on time.
Sure. Okay. Well, please contact me about any of that. If you want to have a chat, I'll give you my mobile number, and any of the questions from today, just feel free to ask. I'm always happy to answer questions about home energy efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Well, thank you very much, Lucinda. Could you stop showing your screen so that we can come back to the main screen? Good. Thank you very much. Very good presentation, and I think people have got a lot of information that they can think about and digest. And I've heard you present on a number of occasions, and every time I learn something new. And tonight I've made some notes again from my own information. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So yeah, thank you all very much, everyone, for attending tonight. I hope it's been useful for you. This is the Wednesday night, of course, is the Emerald Community House Group, and on Saturday morning, Lucinda will be on the Pakenham program. So if you know any people who weren't in attendance tonight who'd like to attend the Pakenham program, then they can certainly do that using the same link. Next Wednesday night, this is the third session in the series, and the final one is next Wednesday night with Gerald Ahrens from Como Energy. And for those of you who aren't aware, when Healesville Core got the grant from Sustainability Victoria to set up the Yarra Valley Community Power Hub, we did that in conjunction with Como Energy. They were our industry partner, so to speak, because Healesville Core is a community energy group of volunteers, and we don't have any technical or any technical expertise in the field. So Como Energy has two directors, Jonathan Prendergast and Gerald Ahrens, who are both highly knowledgeable specialists and consultants in the field. And they worked with us. And so the session next week will be about how community energy groups can utilize the services of a group like Como Energy, and how Como Energy actually worked with the hub to develop a number of different projects. And there are some key projects. I don't know exactly which ones Gerald will choose, but for example, there was a solar car park and battery project with EV chargers in the east end of Healesville that we did a feasibility study on, and Healesville Core is looking to carry that through after the shutdown of the hub. There was also a small microgrid on a street in Chum Creek, just out of Healesville, where the residents were interested, because they had so many blackouts, they were interested in setting up a microgrid, and a feasibility study was done on that as well. And at Bunyip, there was interest in putting in a small solar farm and battery, and I think some EV chargers as well. And Como Energy worked with Bunyip Renewable, Bunyip Renewables Association, I think, BRAG.
Renewable Action Group.
Action Group, thank you very much. Just slipped my mind for a moment. And yeah, so I think they're very interested in continuing with that as well. So there's lots of very interesting information that Gerald will be able to present to you, and I hope you'll be able to spread the word, and you'll be able to come next Wednesday night. And then we'll talk further about the excursion, the field day, next time we meet. So Lucinda, thank you very much again for a great presentation. Thank you again to Emerald and Pakenham for Emerald Community House, Pakenham Living and Learning for hosting the program tonight. And thank you all very much for attending. Great to see you here. And I wish you well. Bye-bye for now.